What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, Coach Steve. With me today is obviously my favorite co-host here, Coach Jibs, longtime boy here. What's going on, Coach Jibs?
What up? What up, man? Ain't much. Just getting through these short February, and I'm looking forward to some of these nicer days coming forward. Even though we're kind of getting hit or miss with like 60 degrees and 30 degrees up in this Northeast climate.
Yeah, it is bound to bounce back and forth, and it feels like it's been forever since our last show. So we have a lot of fun things to talk about today, guys. Of course, I'd like to bring that big announcement that we were gonna do last week, but we saved it for this week here. So if you guys don't know already from our Twitter, Mr. John B, he was been a guest on our show like literally the last 4 years now. He's joining the team here as a new co-host to this team. You'll be seeing his face on a weekly basis now, guys.
I'm super excited about it. I'm proud. I'm honored. Thank you very much for bringing me onto the team. Fantasy Coach is one of the first podcasts that I really got to guest on, and you guys brought me in with open arms back then. And so it was like coming back home, I guess, when you reached out to me and we reached out to each other and kind of made this thing happen. So I'm excited. I think we're going to have a lot of fun this off season. This is like my favorite time of year.
Of course, and one great mind had always said that a three-person podcast is a legendary way to go. So speaking of that man here, our guest for tonight, Garret Price from Dynasty Nerds. What's going on, Garret?
Man, it is good to be back. I think I hopped on with you guys probably a year ago, 2 years ago, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, it's been a while. So
yeah, no, I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to break down the NFC East, talk about some of these players that maybe are gaining some value, losing some value this offseason. So should be a fun show.
Absolutely. So guys, before we do get started, I just wanted to mention our website. It was gone for about like 4 or 5 months. If you Garret, you probably don't know, but we kind of got hacked by China and our whole website just went down. Yeah. It was tough to come back from that, but it took me some time now that this off season's here, and it is back up and running. Guys, we're going to have our articles popping out again. Obviously, all the podcasts from both our shows are here. The rankings. I put this cool Dynasty trade thing up there so you can see all Dynasty trades kind of going through the whole website, and of course, there's some cool stats sheets that I kind of created that you can kind of look at and kind of get your information off there. So please go check out www.thefantasycoaches.com and our brand new site, guys. So very excited to get that back up today, guys. So let's get into the news today, guys. And of course, our slide slow today, guys. If you guys don't know, we do the slides now. I love it. Jibs loves it. John likes it now. Garrett's impressed. I can see. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Blown away.
It's not that great, but it's something, and it gives us something a little different. I like it. So news-wise, guys, I'm just going to run through the news because there's really not much to talk about unless you guys want to spend the next 20 minutes talking about Ian Thomas re-signing with the Carolina Panthers on a 3-year, $17 million extension. Kyle Murray today, if you didn't see on Twitter, kind of called out the Arizona Cardinals today. And then if you also didn't see, the Arizona Cardinals, Packers, Jags, Saints, and Bucks will all be playing one of their home games overseas in one of the multiple locations that the NFL will be playing at next year. And NFL Combine kind of starts today, but really it starts tomorrow, next couple of days. You're going to be able to see these rookies out there performing and testing and drilling and all the in-betweens there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you guys like that kind of stuff, you should definitely watch it out. It's definitely cool to watch for sure. So that's the news. There's really not much, like I said, nothing too crazy. Got a couple more weeks before the NFL free agency kicks off, so that's when things really start opening up. So it's going to be fun then. But until then, guys, we have the NFC East, and we're going to start with the New York Giants, because this was the worst division I could think of to find real fantasy greatness, unfortunately. So, Garret, I'm going to let you go first on this question here. Daniel Jones has been in the league 3 years now, really hasn't stood up to that first-round pick that he was 3 years ago. But is there any hope now with a new coaching regime once again in New York?
There's definitely more hope than there was before. There was very little to almost no hope. You thought that there was even a chance that they could potentially, draft a new quarterback. And I guess that's still a possibility on the table. But I think this is really his make or break it year. We're going to see if he meshes with Brian Daboll. We're going to see if he can run that offense. And I think the perfect scenario that everyone is hoping for, at least everyone that has Daniel Jones on their fantasy team or as a New York Giants fan, is that we see some similar type jump from what Daniel Jones did to what Josh Allen did, where Josh Allen came in, he wasn't, it wasn't the most polished prospect. He had a strong arm and he could run around a little bit. And that was really his calling card. But over the years, he's really developed into a professional quarterback. And now we're talking about a guy that's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Most would even say top 3 potentially. So we're talking about a big jump. If Dable can do that same type of thing for Daniel Jones, it's going to be massive for this offense, because this offense as a whole has been abysmal over the past few years. Part of it's been injury, part of it's been underperformance, part of it's been offensive line. There's a lot of keys to this, but I do think that there are some intangible things that you can't calculate it, right? There's certain things where you can look at analytical profiles and you can crunch all the numbers and watch all the tape and put all the, but there's something about having a new general manager and a new head coach that were actually respected coming in. They were the hot names. They were the ones people really thought could be some of the next greats in this league. And, that's huge for just momentum. So I think that this is a make or break it year for Daniel Jones, but I do think we're going to see definitely a better fantasy production this year than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's what most fantasy owners is looking for, is just some consistency that he hasn't really shown us since his rookie season. But John, how do you feel about Daniel Jones? Are you someone who is trying to kind of buy low on him while you can now, or are you're staying away from that train?
I think you should be buying in low now. I mean, it's crazy to think I'm going to fall for this cheese again, right? I'm going to fall for the Daniel Jones trap. But I think there is some hope. Like Garret had said, you believe in Brian Daboll. You believe in the culture that's going around New York right now. It's this is a make or break year. So buy in now, because if he does take a jump, if he does progress forward in any way, shape, or form, the Giants are probably going to tie themselves to him, and then he becomes a much more valuable dynasty piece. Right now, it's going to be scary, because if he has another down year, who knows? He could, fall the train of Mitch Trubisky. So this is really where I think NFL, the Giants are making a huge decision on him. So I think you need to be a year ahead of that as a dynasty player. So before the Giants commit to him and before he shows anything, you need to get him on your roster, because if this year he does tend to, even if, not saying he blows up, but even if he does progress forward a little bit and shows the Giants that he has some sign of life to him, they'll extend him a little bit. And so then all of a sudden you get a little bit more, length on the chain, so he has more life in dynasty. I think that this could be big for Daniel Jones. If he goes out there and finishes even as a top 20 guy in the fantasy community, it'll look really good. And right now, if someone has him on their roster, they're probably sick of him. They want to get rid of him. I guarantee it. So you could offer up probably late second. I bet you could probably get Daniel Jones for a late second, and I would be willing to take that risk, take that chance.
Yeah, no, especially in this draft class here with the quarterback situation at hand right now, taking a shot on Daniel Jones, who's been in the NFL 3 years, might be worth it in a new looked offense. But Coach Gibbs, buddy, how do you feel about Daniel Jones? Can he kind of rebound from what we've seen, some pretty bad performances over these last 2 years now?
Well, he only could go up. That's what I'm going to say there. But I don't think Daniel Jones has a really good chance next year at all, just because even with the new GM of coach and whatnot, they still have salary cap issues. There's no way they're going to be able to fix that offensive line to make him to be a durable quarterback and perform well. So I have my hesitations there, though. But like Garret said, like John says, there's reason to be to have optimism, and if you could get the guy on the low, you should definitely invest in him.
Right, definitely. And the thing with this whole offense is just about luck. I mean, Daniel Jones continues to get banged up. Saquon continues to get banged up. The whole wide receiver class core continues to get banged up. If you see in my notes here, guys, he's had his, he didn't have a full healthy roster or starting lineup for 2/3 of his games this season. And a quarterback can't kind of grow when they don't have weapons to be on the field. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, he's a buy low option, but I personally wouldn't go out there going nuts about it, but definitely intriguing to see if Daniel Jones can kind of rebound for his career. So, all right, on to the next topic here. Saquon Barkley, guys, and this is probably one of the biggest topics to a lot of fantasy owners wants to know what to do with Saquon Barkley, because we're still chasing that that rookie season of his 3 years ago as well. So was it 4 years? I think he's been in 4 years now. Saquon's been in the league.
This will be his 5th year.
Yeah, 5th year. So it's been quite a while since we've had that amazing rookie season. But John, I'm gonna let you go first on this one. Are you buying back on this?
Yes, I am. I'm eager to answer because I'm buying back in.
Why?
Why? Because I think that he is a supreme talent coming off of a bad injury. I think that was a bad injury that physically takes running backs a while to get back to, what made him special was these, quick agility, the burst, these short yardage things that made him so spectacular. That stuff takes a while to physically really come back from and be 100%. So I think he battled injuries a lot, and coming off that ACL is a big deal. The things that scare me is an offense. I like my running backs in offenses that have a lot of touchdown upside. I agree that there is not a lot of touchdown upside in this offense. So I get you there, but I think that there is enough talent in Saquon Barkley, and the disrespect is so real in Dynasty at this point that it's just doesn't add up to me. He is still a top 5 talent back in this league. And if the Giants even become a relatively functioning offense, he could explode and return value. I'm seeing him go in dynasty startups in 5th rounds and things of that nature, which to me is getting outlandish. It's getting outlandish.
All right. I see you have a high opinion on Saquon Barkley, that's for sure. Coach Jiz, my friend, how do you feel about Saquon Barkley? Do you expect a rebound? Are you just trying to avoid Saquon and taking what you can get for his name value now?
I'm scared, guys. Like, I haven't seen really much out of him in like 2 years, but I'm gonna ride with him one more year because, like John said, he's a good talent. And like, even when Saquon Barkley came back after the midseason injury, he had no quarterback. He was going with the backup for Raptor's sake. So I want to see him with everyone there. Hopefully, the offense is in like a little bit more rhythm and not like taking Kenny Galladay, for example, not like using them right. So like, I feel like they're gonna get that piece of the offense right. So I think Saquon Barkley is a piece that you should kind of keep, and I would buy on the low because people's ideas. I mean, people don't think highly of him right now.
It's a very mixed situation with Saquon with a lot of fantasy owners. But Garrett, are you agreeing with the boys here? Are you kind of on the Saquon train? Are you trying to get him back? Are you just trying to sell off and before maybe something worse happens?
I'm very lukewarm on the subject. I'm like a strong hold because I think if you have Saquon on your team, if you sell him at this point, you're getting peanuts on the dollar. It's just not worth what his upside could be. However, people that do have him on their team, like they're still believers more than likely. Like they still remember what it was like as a rookie when he was, getting around 2,000 total yards and was just a PPR monster and carrying the team on his back. Like those people remember that. So they're not wanting to give him up cheap. So you're kind of stuck in this awkward middle ground where no one wants to pay a lot for him, but everyone that's willing to sell him wants an arm and a leg still to get him. And they want you to pay top 5 running back price. And so I don't know that either is a good route right now. So I think it's a pretty strong hold. If you have them on your roster, don't sell for super cheap. But if you don't have them, I just don't know, especially any running backs as they're approaching 25, 26, 27, that you're looking at peak value price wise for the most part, but yet the return as far as longevity isn't there. So buying a running back at this point in his career is tough anyway. So I think it's a very strong hold for me at this point on Saquon.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat with you. If you have him, you kind of hold on to him. Well, he kind of falls in that group of running backs like Kamara, Henry, a lot of these older running backs, or I guess Saquon isn't as old as some of those other guys, but he falls in that category where, I've mentioned before, guys, like don't sell at a discount. Like I think you'd rather hold and take that risk and hope Saquon comes back and maybe try to sell him then, or you take that risk, he doesn't do as well, but he's still playing on the field. Someone's going to buy a running back for still good value during the season. So trading him now just doesn't make sense. So, and again, personally, I'm not a big fan of Saquon, but if you hold him, just hold on to him for now. So, all right, over to the next group here. Well, not next group, next person here, and it's Kenny Galladay, who again continues to follow this trend of injuries on the New York Giants offense here. Coach Gibbs, though, he's, missed a lot of games over the last couple seasons now. We haven't seen that, that breakout season he had a few years ago. Can he still get there? He's going to be 29, I think, going into the season. So he's only 5 years in the league, too.
I don't think he can. He could be like a good wide receiver, but I don't think he's going to have that breakout year like he had in Detroit where he's scoring 15, 14 touchdowns and being like a lead dog in the offense. But like, I don't have faith that the Giants scoring that many points, so I find it hard that it's going to be far from few that Kenny Galladay could get like majority of them with Saquon, with I guess Kadarius Toney being in year two too as well. So I'm not on board with Kenny Galladay, but he's intriguing.
He's definitely somewhat intriguing. He's their wide receiver one. Garrett, how do you feel about Kenny Galladay? He's 29. No one wants to trade for a 29-year-old wide receiver at this point here, but does he present maybe a buy low window for contenders?
Potentially. He is a really, really difficult one to nail down because his price seems to be all over the board. I've seen people, straight up for like 2/4, and more or less just get him off my team. I just don't want him. And then there's other people that are still, wanting high seconds for Kenny Galladay. So it's all going to depend on the league there. I'm comfortable giving up like an early 3rd round pick. If that's the price point on him, then count me in. But anytime I got to sneak into the 2nd round, I'm probably going to be out because I want the youth. And I think this is for all the deficiencies in this class. There are quite a few solid wide receivers. And so if anything, I would rather just take some receivers in that 2nd round and load up there. But the 3rd round, even if he gets back to the point where he's offering you, 65 catches, 950 yards and 9 touchdowns, like that's still a fantastic wide receiver 3 for your fantasy football team. And I think that's in the realm of possibility in the Dable offense. So I'll buy in the 3rd. I'm not willing to buy in the 2nd.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of on the same page as you. I agree with that for sure. Mr. John here, my friend, how are you on Kenny G right now, man? Like,
I didn't love Kenny G. I'll be honest, I didn't love Kenny G even in his great years in Detroit because I don't like that style for fantasy, especially in, today's NFL, these big 50-50 type wide receivers stretch the field. Here's a bomb play every once in a while. Like, these guys they're streaky, and for fantasy, it's nice, and it's you want to get attached to good quarterbacks like Tyler Lockett is to Russell Wilson, like those types of plays. I get it. Every once in a while, if you're tied to the right guy, it works, but you're tied to Daniel Jones, and so I don't love what Kenny Galladay does tied to Daniel Jones because they just don't mesh up well for fantasy points, in my opinion. I just don't want, he'll have a couple splash plays, he'll have a big catch every once in a while, and it's like, that's nice, but without a more consistent quarterback or more consistent quarterback play, I'm just not interested. So, I'm kind of with Garrett. If I'm willing to throw a 3rd at you and I can take that chance with a 3rd, sure. Like, I mean, there's not much in the 3rd, but I'm not giving up a 2nd for a 29-year-old Kenny Galladay. Like, I'm just not doing it, because his best years are probably this coming year, if anything, and then it's just going to start to physically decline at age 30, 31. So, really, what are you getting out of that? I don't know. I'm kind of out on Kenny Galladay for Dynasty.
Yeah, no, I definitely get you guys for sure. I mean, he reminds me of Alshon Jeffries. Well, he had a couple of great years in Chicago, moved to Philly, and he kind of just never really got things going again to the point we all wish he would have. And then the injuries piled up. He was the same type of wide receiver. And Kenny G's kind of falling in that group there. I mean, if you can buy him low, they did pay big money to have him probably for the next year or two, more than likely, based on how the contract works. So, I mean, you're going to get at least probably a wide receiver 3 at best, maybe. But it's not well invested into a 29-year-old wide receiver that's had maybe, I think, 1.5 good seasons at this point of his career. So, all right, guys, on to the next team now. We on to the Washington Commanders. It's weird to say still getting
used to it.
I swear I thought I was going to say Washington football team, but I was really happy I actually said it right here this time. So, Garrett, we're going to start with you on this one. And a man who I love so much, Terry McLaurin here. But he's kind of just the talent seems to be there, but it just never seems to be what the fantasy finishes for him kind of goes with. But are you still really high on Terry McLaurin, even though I think he's 27 going into this season here now? He's a little older, unfortunately, but are you still high on Terry McLaurin?
I'm still in on Terry McLaurin, absolutely. And I think this actually presents a good buy window because last offseason he had a really strong finish fantasy football wise. He was a mid-range wide receiver 2, and it looked like he was going to make that jump into that wide receiver 1 conversation. And especially once they lined him up with Ryan Fitzpatrick, that was the goal there. You know, you have a guy that's going to just sling it down the field and just YOLO, don't care about anything else. I don't care if I throw picks. I don't care if it's a tie, like I'm just slinging it. And that was going to be great for Terry McLaurin's game. Well, then he goes down, and you have Taylor Heineke, and Heineke filled in admirably. And he actually had some decent fantasy football finishes, but that was mostly because of his legs and doing different things there. But it was not good for Terry McLaurin overall. But you still see him make some fantastic catches. He's still great at getting separation. It's all going to depend on, can they get even just an average quarterback in there. I'm not asking for, him to get Mahomes or Allen or anybody of that caliber. Like, can I get Kirk Cousins? Like, can I get Kirk Cousins on the Washington Commanders? Can I get, somebody of that caliber? Can I get something like that there? I'm all in. Like, I think this is a guy that could absolutely be a top 12, maybe even top 8 type of wide receiver in the NFL and for your fantasy football teams. But the hard part is right now that's all speculation. There's a very real chance they go with a rookie quarterback too, which that always is a coin flip whenever that happens. So it's all about your risk tolerance. If you're somebody that's a little bit more willing to gamble, he could be a high-end asset, and this could be the cheapest you've gotten him since his rookie season. But it could also be, you paid a hefty price for a fairly young wide receiver. He's kind of in his prime now. He's not really young anymore, but you paid a hefty price, and he's still just this low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, and you're like, man, I overpaid for Terry McLaurin. But that's the good news is I think even worst-case scenario, like, I don't see him finishing much worse than he did this year. Like, this is probably right around the floor of where he's at. I think it's probably only going to go up here, barring injury.
Nah, I definitely love your points on that, John, my friend. How concerned would you be if they stick with Heineke or they go out and get one of these rookie quarterbacks here and they don't make that massive upgrade? Does that scare you off from McLaurin? Him having this floor as a possible future?
It wouldn't scare me off of him completely. It would. A rookie quarterback would scare me more than Heineke. But I think, like Garrett said, this is his floor. And it's like, if I'm getting 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, as my floor, right? And then God forbid the touchdowns go up because the quarterback play goes up and all of a sudden become a 1,300 yard, 8 touchdown guy. Like, that's a big difference in wide receiver finish. That's the difference between wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 8. You know what I'm saying? And so all that is the difference in a good quarterback. So Terry McLaurin's still a great wide receiver. He's still an unbelievable separator. He'll never really get out of that, wide receiver. I think this, like we said, wide receiver 25 to 30 is the lowest he's ever going to be. And if that's what you can get him at, if people are valuing him as a low wide receiver 2, I would trade for that all day. And if you can build a team around that and you have Terry McLaurin as your wide receiver 2 or as your wide receiver 3, I think you're building a good roster at that point.
No, definitely. And I think he's on pace right now with DeAndre Hopkins for like the most quarterbacks in his early on his career.
Crazy. That stat up there alone should make you realize like what he has worked through. 8 quarterbacks in 3 seasons is insane to be able to still put up decent numbers. We joke about DJ Moore, but I mean, Terry McLaurin has done it. You know what I'm saying? So we're like, oh, get DJ Moore quarterback. We're like, well, Terry McLaurin hasn't really had a quarterback and he still can do fantasy numbers. So I am not afraid of Terry McLaurin at all.
This is very, very true. Coach Gibbs, my friend, you see the inconsistency with him, 4 wide receiver 1 performances and then 12 games outside the top 36. Does a player like that scare you off?
No, it's fantasy football.
Okay.
Things happen. And he had a crappy quarterback. So the stats don't lie, man. The guy still beat the lead hog no wide receivers in the offense. So Taylor Heineke, you can suit me up. Hopefully they get a better option, but I'm all in for Terry Scary this year, or just as a dynasty asset.
I think we can all agree that Terry McLaurin definitely is someone, if you can buy low on now in this offseason, you need to, because he's their wide receiver one. If I'm not mistaken, he had like 146 targets, and the next highest guy had 69. He's their option, their weapon on offense, no matter who is out there at this point. And it doesn't seem like they're probably going to go out there and maybe get anyone who's really going to take those targets away from him. So a guy with 120, 130 targets is something you want on your dynasty team, no matter how inconsistent he could be at times. So, all right, Mr. John, over to you. And this might be a quick one for everyone here, but Curtis Samuel, I mean, big free agent addition for the Washington Commanders last offseason here, but didn't really play this season. You know, he sparked the year before he came over with the Panthers, but is there a turnaround for him?
I'm going to say no. If we're questioning Terry McLaurin's fantasy value based on this quarterback play, then I certainly don't want the wide receiver 2 on that team based on quarterback play. So I like Curtis Samuel. I think he's a good player. He's a great story. It's great utility on offense, but I don't see him being a fantasy difference maker anytime soon.
I couldn't agree with you more, honestly. Coach Gibbs, how about you, my friend? You know, could his versatility be something worth acquiring?
I might dab a little 4th round pick on him if the owner's willing to give me up on that. But yeah, he'd be interesting. Like, say for instance, we're gonna get the Antonio Gibson in a bit, but say if JD McKissick leaves town, like, and that wide receiver running back kind of like options open for the team. So I think he could kind of slot in hypothetically, but then again, he's not really healthy all the time. So it's kind of hard for me, but he's still young, which is pretty amazing. Like, so.
He is very young. I think he's 26 now, I think, going into this season, if I'm not mistaken. Garrett, my friend, how about you? Are you buying him for like a 4th? Are you selling him off for a 4th? What intrigues you more?
I'm actually still kind of in on Curtis Samuel. I know it seems kind of wild, but it was just a couple seasons ago that he was getting used like around the goal line in Carolina. And, you know, he in the absence of Christian McCaffrey, like low key, they kind of had the Debo blueprint with him before the 49ers did. That they were using him in both capacities quite often. And so he was actually getting rushing touchdowns as well as receiving touchdowns. And look, I get it. This year was a hot mess. It was a new team, all of that stuff, but it's Ron Rivera. It was a coach that he had played for in Carolina. So it's not like it's a guy that doesn't know him and know his abilities. He came to team up with Terry McLaurin, who he also played with at Ohio State. So like there's a lot of like connecting points. And sometimes you just have those seasons where a guy's injured and he just kind of gets forgotten. Honestly, that's kind of what happened to Debo the season before. People were drafting Debo in the 9th round, 10th round, 11th round of startups. And now people are taking him as a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty. I'm not saying Curtis Samuel is going to be a top 5 receiver. I'll be thrilled if he's a wide receiver 3. But I think the juice is worth the squeeze here at this point. I just did a startup recently. I got him in the 15th round. Like at that point, give me upside all day. So yeah, I not only would I give a 4th, I'd probably give a 3rd. I'm just as interested in him as I am Kenny Galladay.
I love the comparison.
It's funny. I'm almost more interested in Curtis Samuel than I am.
Yeah, exactly.
What does that tell you?
That's how bad the Giants offense is. You want that instead. But yeah, guys, I mean, he's worth the gamble on. I mean, worth a 4th round pick. I mean, he's produced at times. So, I mean, it's worth a try. Someone else that has to catch passes on this offense here, especially if Logan Thomas maybe doesn't really come back as quickly maybe from that ACL tear that we would hope so. So we'll see if he's healthy by the start of the season. So, but a guy who pretty much is most of their offense here this coming season here, and Coach Gibbs, you walked away, so you're going to lose your first spot on this, my friend. So, Garrett, you're going to get another first shot here today. Antonio Gibson here, and I forget the question I asked about Antonio Gibson. Yeah, you know, is he actually an RB1, or is there just way too many people in front of him that makes him not an RB1?
It's so tough. The running back position, specifically in Dynasty right now, is really, really interesting because basically you have Jonathan Taylor, who's low key in his own tier. Then you have guys that are kind of young, still have some upside in DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, guys that people are interested in. They're kind of their own little mini tier. Then there's like the Christian McCaffrey tier where people have no idea what to do with him. Like, should he still be the top guy? Like, he puts up 30 points a game, but should he be like RB10 because he's never healthy? I don't know what to do with him. So, you have that. And then you have like all of these players that have been solid for years, but the changing of the guard is coming. You have the Derrick Henrys, Alvin Kamara's, Ezekiel Elliott's, Dalvin Cook's, like Joe Mixon's, like all of these guys that are 26. Most of them are going to be 27 or older in this coming season. And the writing tends to typically be on the wall at that point. At that point, you're really not looking for many more productive seasons out of running backs. So it's a really, really weird space right now. There's only a few guys that you feel really good about for dynasty purposes. And there's only one that really feels like a sure thing in Jonathan Taylor. So you could make the argument that Antonio Gibson's a top 10 running back right now, as far as dynasty purposes with him being young. But you could also make the argument that, he's been a little inconsistent, banged up with injuries. It sounds like they want to re-sign McKissick. Will there be more, options, more mouths to feed this year? Like, there's so many narratives going around Antonio Gibson. I like the guy. I think what it comes down to for me, he was right on the border when I was trying to decide my dynasty top 12 running backs. It was right on the cusp of like J.K. Dobbins. I really like J.K. Dobbins a lot, so I had him in my top 12. I actually had him higher than most people, I think, probably at this point. But guys like him that weren't in the top 12 last year due to injury kind of bumped him out for me. So he's like right on the cusp. But if you had him as high as 7 or 8, I wouldn't blame you.
I love it. They're one of our longtime friends of the show, Kyle. He said that there's not much difference between Gibson and Javonte Williams, but he prefers Gibson. So interesting take there, Kyle. Always love that. I'll have to get you on the show soon, man, and we'll see how explain that a little bit more. But Jibs, you're back now. You missed your first shot at Antonio Gibson here, but I'll let you go second.
Sorry, my dog is tripping right now.
Yeah, it's okay. We know our mascot. Antonio Gibson, my friend. Do you believe there is that potential to be a top 5 back still, or he just doesn't have it in him to actually reach out?
Top 5?
Yeah, top 5. I mean, can he reach? He finished RB10. Could he be a top 5? Can he be one of those elite guys, or is it just something that's not going to happen for him?
Nah, I don't think he could reach top 5.
Why not?
Just because, like, Washington offense has to be either like ungodly, just willing to give him like 300 plus rushing load, I would believe, and he'll have to score a massive amount of touchdowns for him to like accrue that many points. But if the quarterback situation gets a whole lot better, like, yeah, he could be a top 5 running back if everything goes well. But I'm not in the camp to believe all the things are going to go right for the Commanders, because nothing goes right for the Commanders ever. So, but for RB1 next year, Dynasty, yeah, I think he's right there on the line.
All right. Mr. John, my friend, does the Commanders bringing back McKissick, does that really lower you for Antonio Gibson? Does that really crush his value if that were to happen?
No, I don't think so. I think because we've seen him do it with J.D. McKissick there as well, so it's not the end of the world to me if they bring him back. And most teams, realistically, I wouldn't be shocked if they get McKissick and someone else. I mean, most teams go into it with depth, and they know they need multiple guys to survive an entire season, and especially with Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson does get injured. He does get banged up. So the Commanders know that. And so it'd be ill-advised of them to go in there with just Antonio Gibson and nobody else. So I expect them to re-sign McKissick. I expect them to maybe go get someone else. And all of a sudden but he'll still get his target share. He'll still get his carries. He'll still get all that. It's just where they split up the other 30% that's left over. So maybe McKissick gets less work, and all of a sudden they give it to Patterson, the rookie last year, and he starts getting involved a little bit more. But I think Antonio Gibson, they kind of know how they want to use him, where they want to use him. It's pretty consistent in the attempts week in, week out. They love him. They love him in the passing game. So I think Logan Thomas struggling to come back from injury, there is a correlation between tight end targets and running back targets. So if all of a sudden Logan Thomas isn't ready to go right out the gates, Antonio Gibson could be, heavily targeted early on in the season.
That would be very great for a lot of fantasy owners, especially if they would use my boy Jarrett Patterson a little bit more. But that would definitely take away value for sure. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely an RB1. Could he be a top 5? More than likely not. I mean, to be a top 5, you either have to basically see most of the workload, which he kind of does, but the targets aren't really there for him. And even without McKissick, he's averaging like 4 targets a game. Some of these great guys, they're targeting, 6-8 times a game here, and Gibson just isn't using that kind of role here. So he's a great RB1. You should be happy of a nice low-end RB1 to have on your team. He should probably dominate and be really good for your fantasy team over the next couple seasons here. But him reaching that elite level, likely not to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if it did. So.
It would just be hard. Like Jib said, he would need to be in those teens for touchdowns. Like he would need to be teens, high teens. If he has one of those outlier seasons where all of a sudden he has 14 rushing touchdowns and 3 or 4 reception touchdowns, it's like, then he'll finish top 5. That's just how it works. But I just don't see the Washington Commanders putting up massive points week in, week out.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's possible personally, but I kind of agree with you. So. All right, over to the Dallas Cowboys now, guys. Aaron, I don't remember what I said about this question here. I got to remember my questions. John, this one is no, this stuff's from the beginning again. Garrett, you get to go again.
Whoa, no pressure.
I know. With this backfield here now between Zeke and Tony Pollard, moving forward, do you believe these two kind of just bring each other's value down where they're just not? You're not getting the value that you might want to from these guys?
It's probably going to trend that direction. We definitely saw Pollard looking very explosive last year, ripping off some big plays. But I think partly because of the money, but partly because he's still a better back than people give him credit for. Zeke can get it done between the tackles, and he still has very solid hands. So, I think this is going to look similar, maybe not quite to the perfect 50-50 split that we saw last year in Denver. But I think it's going to be closer to like Javonte and Melvin Gordon, where both guys are heavily involved. There's going to be Zeke weeks. There's going to be Pollard weeks. And good luck figuring out which one's going to be which. If one of them goes down with injury, then the other one's going to really have a spike in value. But until then, you're looking at both guys. Zeke's probably a high-end RB2, with Pollard being more like a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. And nothing wrong with that. You need those players on your team, but Zeke's not winning you leagues anymore, and Pollard's not going to get enough workload to do it either.
No, I definitely agree with that last take there for sure. John, I'm going to split this next one up here for you and Jib, so I'm going to let you stick with Tony Pollard here. Does everyone loves Tony Pollard? They think, if he just saw more workload, he could be really great, but do you ever see that really happening for Tony Pollard, or people just imagining something that might never really happen for Tony Pollard? Because he's going to eventually get older where he's not going to be a young sprout if he ever does get the starting job, possibly.
Yeah, I think this is a funny, used to talk about this with Brian all the time. It's funny. People want to just project, he does really well with the work we're giving him. If we give him more work, then that will just extrapolate into more points and expand it. No, Tony Pollard's good in his role because he's good in his role that he does. He's not an every down back. He's a good slasher. He's good at catching defenses off guard and these different things. If you started giving him a Zeke, carry load, his yards per carry would come down and it'd be much more realistic, and he wouldn't be the same explosive Tony Pollard that we all come to know. So to answer your question, no, I think what we're getting out of Tony Pollard is who he is. And the Cowboys know that, and they like that. They're happy with what they got last year. 130, maybe they bring them up to 150, 160 attempts, but they're totally happy with that. 150 attempts. If you're going to give them what they got, close to 800 yards, they're totally psyched, and they're going to be fine with that week in, week out, and they're not going to change anything, and they're going to keep it as it is. So I think what we saw, could be, maybe it's closer to 50-50, but even still, I think we could see it in that exactly what we saw this year is what we see next year. It worked well on their run game. I don't think was a problem. I think their offense became stagnant in other areas, but when they needed to get a couple carries for yards, they could hand it off either way to Zeke or Tony, and they knew they were getting some positive yardage.
I love it. Love that for sure. On the flip side now, Coach Gibbs, Zeke Elliott right now, I mean, yeah, he's getting up there in age. Yes, we saw him kind of break down this past season here, but does he present like a kind of a low buy low value because he's still going to be using a high scoring offense more than likely, and likely we'll see a lighter workload, which will keep him kind of fresher throughout the season?
I don't know. I wouldn't really want to buy into him because, like, Garrett, what would you think Zeke's price would go? The asking price? I'm sure it's gonna be a first rounder, but I wouldn't pay a medium, like a mid range first rounder for him at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you're probably, if I'm the Zeke owner, which I don't have any shares of Zeke, but if I was the Zeke owner, I would be looking to get probably in super flex leagues. I would want a mid first. I would want to be able to get in on, Wilson or I doubt Burks is still there, but Wilson or Drake London or somebody like that, or hopefully get a running back to maybe replace him like a Spiller or Walker. So that's probably the range. You're looking at like a 1.6, 1.7 that the Zeke owner would probably want.
I'd rather go youth right there. And with that being said, like, I feel like this Cowboys backfield might kind of end up like the Cleveland Browns situation. Like, maybe like Zeke Elliott's becoming like a Chubb who catches more passes, and Pollard's kind of that's like slasher that we all say, and he's pretty good at getting some yards after the catch, and like has shown to be a touchdown magnet at times as well. So like I just don't want to like put all my chips in at Zeke at the moment, especially given his age and some of like the efficiencies that we saw from him last year rushing the ball. So I'm not really on Zeke, but he's a good piece for a championship contender, though, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I could agree with that for sure. I mean, he's definitely going to continue to produce. It won't be at what we saw over his career, but there's still something there. So, all right, boys, you guys kind of said everything I could possibly think of when it comes to these two here. So, great work on that one. So we're going to move along here to the next group here, and let's see who goes next here. John, you're going to go first on this one. Amari Cooper. He's got that connection with Dak. He's a little older, unfortunately. Definitely didn't perform to his standard this past season. And then you have Michael Gallup, the couple years younger guy with possibly a new opportunity, even though coming off an injury. Which of these two guys would you prefer moving forward?
I think I still prefer Amari Cooper, but it's interesting that you bring up Michael Gallup because I think he is a great name going into free agency and potentially changing teams. He is someone that I do target in a lot of dynasty leagues. I have been all off season, because people don't think much of him. And you can get him for super cheap, and all of a sudden I think he is a great wide receiver too on a team, and a contending team will do that and make that move. So if he stays in Dallas, great. You know what you're getting in Dallas, and hopefully he stays healthy and he can be that wide receiver 2-3, or he goes somewhere else and he's still that wide receiver 2-3 with potential upside. So, but ultimately, as I digress on Michael Gallup, I would still take Amari Cooper. I still think Amari Cooper is the more elite talent at this point. You might only get 1 or 2 years of that eliteness. But I don't know if Michael Gallup will ever hit the pinnacle that Amari Cooper can hit.
No, I love the take on that for sure. Coach Gibbs, how do you feel about these two here? Which side are you leaning with these guys?
It pains me to say Cooper because I think he'll has the first shot at getting out of town. I heard like talks of the Dallas Cowboys wanting to extend Gallup. So if he's there with Lamb and the myriad of weapons they have there, I think he'll be hampered down. Given that being said, if Cooper goes somewhere else, maybe he's playing second fiddle, but I still like his talent more than Gallup at this point as a tangible thing for consistent fantasy production.
Okay. And Garrett, I'm going to give you a little bit of harder question here. I'm going to change it up a little bit.
Lay it on me.
Would you rather right now buy into Cooper for a late first, or would you rather buy into Gallup for, let's say, a early third, maybe a late second right now, based on their situations right now moving forward?
That's definitely tougher because, a late second, early third is not much at all. I am a little concerned. Gallup is going to be coming off that torn ACL, and it took a month for them to actually do surgery because the swelling was pretty bad there. So it does leave me a little bit concerned about his recovery time and, how quickly Michael Gallup might be back on the field. But for that price, I think that's too good of a price to pass up because you can recover a late second, early third for almost nothing. I mean, it's not going to cost you much. So for that price tag, I'd be fine with probably taking Gallup over Cooper. But even Cooper for a late first, I'm in. I think he's been one of the more undervalued, more disrespected wide receivers in his time in the NFL. And all the guy has done is produce. I know this year was a slightly worse season than other years, but even that, it was still a solid year. So I would, in that scenario, take the Gallup side, but I do still like Amari Cooper quite a bit, regardless if that's in Dallas or not.
Yeah, I think both these guys are overall just underrated value still that you could still get produced. Can't talk tonight. Can produce for your fantasy teams. So we can think of Cooper. I mean, he's still a 1B, 1A on a high power offense in Dallas. He has a connection with Dak. You're going to get a guy who's going to put up between 13 and 15 fantasy points for you on a most week basis there. And then you have Gallup, where his situation is obviously a little cloudier because of the injury, but he's someone that you could still buy low into. And if he does happen to go to a new team, I think he goes back to Dallas, honestly, now with this injury, unfortunately, which really sucks because his value would be great, but he's still going to be a guy, even if he doesn't produce this season. If Cooper's gone after the next year, he jumps into that wide receiver 2 spot, which could be very valuable. So getting these guys now while they're kind of on obviously down seasons and down situations right now could be good for your fantasy teams this season and the seasons to come. All right. Dalton Schultz, my man Dalton Schultz here, guys. Jibs, I'm going to start with you on this one. Dalton Schultz, I mean, really started to emerge last season, obviously with, Blake Jarwin going down. But this season, I don't think anyone really had this coming here with his production and what he was able to do. I'm pretty sure we had during the pandemic, like 4 or 5 startups, and he was going in the 27th, 28th rounds of a lot of these startups here. And he balled out this year, but he's a free agent. Are you buying the breakout?
I'll buy the breakout. I hope he stays with the Cowboys just because he has, rapport there. But we all seen the Cowboys utilize their tight ends. We've seen Jason Witten have his years. We've seen Blake Jarwin have his year for a year, and then Dalton Schultz has emerged. But I like what I saw at Dalton Schultz. He third in the team in targets, 5th in the red zone targets as well. But he had the most red zone touchdown passes, so they utilize him pretty damn well. And not really like much things you can rely on, red zone touchdowns and all that crap. But I like how they operate with them, and I'll definitely buy into them. That I think like out of all like these breakout tight ends over the last years, I think this one is the most legit one, rather than like chasing Robert Tonyan.
Yeah, Tonyan. So sad to see him not be on the field this season to see if he could really, replicate that prior season. So, but Garrett, my friend, how do you feel about Dalton Schultz? Does his value for him be better if he goes back to Dallas next season? Obviously.
That's solely what my take is on Dalton Schultz. You tell me he's back in Dallas, thoroughly interested. I think he's a locking in for a top 6 tight end, and it's tough to get tight end production right now. There's not a lot of good tight ends out there. So if he's back in Dallas, I'm all in. But I don't think he's a special tight end talent by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's more a product of this good offense, and Dak has a good rapport with him. So if he goes somewhere else in free agency, I'm the opposite. Like I'm very much so out. I'm not interested. So it's all going to depend on what happens with him in free agency.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. John, my friend, how do you feel about Dalton Schultz? Does his breakout give you confidence if he happens to go to another place that he's someone who's a top 10 tight end still?
Not enough confidence that I'd be like really buying into him, but enough confidence that if we're in a startup, I might draft him late, right? Like, he'd be my late round target kind of guy in that pile of, your Mike Gesicki's of the world. But I'm not buying into the breakout to the point where I'm actively trying to add him to my rosters. I'm like, hey, this was a good year. If he's back in Dallas, I'm with Garrett. Yep, I'm all in. If he's back in Dallas, I like it. He easily could replicate, but I don't think he didn't really break out in the way that had these amazing catches and huge touchdown plays. And he's just, again, product of a good offense. He was there. He was Mr. Necessary. And, a healthy tight end for 18 games will hopefully give you this type of production. So that's what I think Dalton Schultz is. If he comes back to Dallas, I'm excited. If he's anywhere else, I'm buying in, but not nearly as excited about it.
Yeah, I think landing spot really makes Dalton Schultz value kind of go up or down. I mean, obviously Dallas, that we've seen Dallas over basically over the last decade or two now, they've always produced good tight ends. If he went to maybe somewhere like the Chargers, I would still be intrigued with that because they use their tight ends. But if he ends up in like the Jets or maybe even the Titans to some extent, maybe the Titans are okay. But the Jets, I mean, I don't think Dalton Schultz is that type of talent that's going to do what he's doing now on the New York Jets or something. And another similar situation that I can't even think of another team that might need a tight end right now that would actually pay out for him. But if he goes back to Dallas, I think that's what the value want. I think trying to sell high now makes the most sense, but you might want to wait until if he signs with Dallas, you kind of want him. So it's like you might want to hold on to him. I think that's really, that comes down to it. You might hold on to him because you got him for basically nothing, more than likely, wherever you got him, either during a trade or a startup, more than likely. So you just hold on to him and just have a tight end who will produce at least decent numbers over his career, as long as he's in a situation where they utilize the tight end. All right, and on to the last team, Coach Gibbs' favorite team of the night here, the Philadelphia Eagles, guys. And again, one of the biggest teams that have a ton of talent, but it's still kind of question marks of a lot of these players. But Jalen Hurts obviously, lit the fantasy world on storm early on in his season this past year. But Garrett, are you buying in that Jalen Hurts is one of these next great young quarterbacks, or we still don't know what's going on with that?
One of the next great young ones, I'm not quite there, but I do think he's been undervalued over the past couple seasons. And as long as he's the starter, he gives me, and this is going to sound like it's not a compliment, but I really do mean for it to be a compliment. He reminds me of what Tyrod Taylor did, or Tyrod Taylor, however you want to pronounce it. But he reminds me of what he did in Buffalo. He had 3 seasons where he was a top 12 fantasy quarterback. A lot of that was because he's a fantastic athlete that got you rushing yards, and he was a competent enough passer where he could get it done through the air as well. Now, I think Hurts is a better passer than Tyrod Taylor was, and I think he's going to have an opportunity to prove it this year. I do worry slightly about Deshaun Watson. I think this would be a landing spot that would make a lot of sense. And the Eagles have the draft capital to make something like that happen with having 3 first-round picks. So it's a situation that I could potentially see happening. So that scares me a little bit. But that being said, I still think it's a long shot. I'm in on Jalen Hurts, but I'm going in knowing that I'm not getting this guy necessarily long-term. If I get him long-term, awesome. But I'm going in as a contender, knowing that this is a piece that could help me win over the next 2 seasons. I'm not necessarily counting on him as my super flex franchise quarterback over the next decade.
All right. I love the take there. John, my friend, over to you. What do you take on Jalen Hurts? Is he someone you want to get in on your fantasy teams, or is the situation just too risky for you?
It's too risky for me. And that's saying something, because I'm a pretty risky guy. But Jalen Hurts he's like holding a firecracker right now, in my opinion. You don't want it to blow up in your hand. You just don't. But he's going to shine bright while he's shining. But I have a feeling that he's just not the future for Philadelphia. I just don't know. I just don't think Philadelphia knows. And so, I'm not buying in Dynasty, because he could be Jameis Winston in a couple of years, and all of a sudden you got nothing left. And so I'm not buying into him. If you have him on your team, you have him on your roster, great. Use him while you can. And certainly I'm not trading him away, because while he's starting, he's a great piece. But just know that could blow up in your face because all of a sudden they trade away and get Deshaun Watson, or, they draft a guy, or, a year from now they move on from him for whatever reasons. And so I like Jalen Hurts as the player. I love him in redraft. I love him, for a year or two, if you're a guy in contention, but I'm not buying in long term. I'm not sitting there, like you said, buying a super flex dynasty team, buying in and saying, okay, I got him and Lamar Jackson, I'm good for the next 10 years. Like I'm not, you buckle up, because you probably got some stuff you got to work on if that's what you're thinking. So, I think you certainly can have fun and win next year that way, but it might just be a rough ride.
All right. Coach Jibbs, my friend, you have the inside source on this team. You're inside the locker room here with the Eagles. How are you feeling on Jalen Hurts' future?
Oh, well, I can't go past 1 year, and that's reason for pause. I can't really buy into him. He's a fantastic fantasy player. You saw the rushing yards. He doesn't have that much passing volume, but there's a lot of things to be said. He could be. I don't think he has an upside to be elite passer at all. So that kind of that makes me have skepticism that is not the long-term option. So I think if you had him on your team, you could show them the stats last year and get you a nice little piece of candy. So I'm more on the sell side for Jalen Hurts, but don't give him up for nothing.
Great. I hope you don't give him up for nothing, because if that's the case, play fantasy with me. But see, with me, guys, I've been kind of warming up to Jalen Hurts, and I feel like there's a deadline when it comes to Jalen Hurts. And I think once the Deshaun Watson situation is figured out and he doesn't go to Philly, I'd want to start buying a Jalen Hurts at this point, because I like the rushing ability to him. I like that the Eagles hopefully will add more weapons. I mean, outside of Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, you had Jalen Rieger. He's a nice deep ball guy, but he doesn't really have the weapons, and he had a carousel of running backs all season. You can't always succeed that way, but he was able to put up fantasy numbers on a week-and-week basis here. He has that scrappy quarterback mentality. But again, like Jib said, there's a situation I think you guys all mentioned. If Deshaun Watson goes there and he ends up on Houston, I don't really want him at all on Houston. So it really will depend on what happens this offseason. But if he can get past the draft, he can get past Deshaun Watson, then I'm going to start buying into him. But people are probably trying to sell him high still, and the value of buying him high like that is way too risky for me to go after.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't enjoy the ride, because this guy does not perform till the fourth quarter, guys. Just to let you know that.
He didn't throw a single pick in the fourth quarter this year, just so you guys know.
That's actually a fun stat. He didn't throw. That's real. He didn't throw a single pick in the fourth quarter.
Swear.
Wow.
I looked it up.
That's a fun stat.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the whole start of the game.
Don't talk about the first three quarters.
Hey, garbage time counts just as much.
I love me some garbage time. God damn it!
He's not throwing that many picks. 17 picks, I'd be like, all right, yeah, that's.
I just like.
No. All right, over to one of his only two pass catchers in Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, man, I was a huge fan of him coming into the draft last year, and I still love him. But can he kind of fell off with the rest of his top three guys there with Waddle and Chase? Can he rejoin them still? Is that possible in this offense here, or is it too much to ask for?
I think it's hard for two reasons. It's hard because that offense, Jalen Hurts is not going to throw the ball enough for him to be a top 10 guy. I just don't think that's gonna happen. As well as we've talked about it a million times before, the depth at wide receiver. There's so many good wide receivers right now. It would just be hard for him to crack, that top 10, top 15 list because of how good the people are in front of him. Unless he goes out and has this prolific season next season, I just don't see it happening. I still think there'll be 15 guys ahead of him, which just sucks. But that's just the two reasons why. But I do love him as a talent. I think he's a great wide receiver. I just think there's just a plethora of great wide receivers out there right now.
I love it. Yeah, it's unfortunate because he has that talent. It's just that there's so many, like you said, so many great guys here. Jibbs, over to you, my friend. how are you on Devontae Smith? Can he still make that leap, or will he ever make that leap over his career?
I think he will make the leap over his career, but I don't think it'll happen next year. Just the way the Eagles are suited right now, they're just basically a run-first team. They'll love to run the ball, and I don't think unless like the Eagles give Devonta Smith like 10 targets a game, because there's some times where they just lull him. He's not even in the game at times, so he needs to have very large target share and a lot of volume. But we also need Jalen Hurts to be more than a average quarterback next year too for him to make that leap. But I feel like guys like Waddle and better situations and Chase is in a far superior situation. So Jesus Christ, he has a long way to catch up, but I think he still has he still has talent at the end of the day.
All right. Garrett, over to you, my friend. I'm gonna change your question a little bit here. I mean, 1,000, almost 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's pretty solid for a rookie season. I think back in the day, I'd be like, yeah, I had a really good season. But all the time now, all these rookies just kind of go off. But with this upcoming class here, we have been spoiled. You're right. With this upcoming class here now, is Devontae Smith someone that you would rather have on your team than one of these wide receivers coming out?
I think so. I had a very high grade on him coming out last year, and it's definitely obvious that the Jalen Hurts situation does make him a little bit more difficult for fantasy football purposes. But you mentioned it before. We've just been so spoiled that we have lost the ability to be able to have patience, I think, in fantasy football. And it's because the past 3 years in a row, we had Waddle and Chase this year. The year before we had Justin Jefferson just go absolutely nuts, and CeeDee Lamb had a good start to it, and it slowed off a little bit. And then before that, we had DK and AJ Brown and Terry McLaurin all going nuts in their rookie campaigns, and that's the tough part. Is just now it feels like if they don't go nuts as a rookie, will they ever? He showed enough. He didn't have a Jalen Reagor season. He didn't have this, just putrid year. Yeah. This was still a good to above average year for a lot of receivers. Finished as wide receiver 29. That's still really solid as a rookie. So I'm still buying in. I actually think he's a really good value right now. And I think people love Treylon Burks, and I get it. And people love Garrett Wilson, and I get it. Like, it is a good class, but as a raw prospect, I think he would be the most talented prospect in this class. But now you do have to factor in situations. So if you could trade straight up, we're looking at super flex rankings here, that probably right around that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 as Wilson, Burks, London, whoever. All those 3 guys are going to be somewhat interchangeable as the draft goes. But once you're in the midst of that tier, if you could get Devontae Smith for one of those guys, I would probably be willing to do that. There's risk involved, but there's also a ton of risk with these rookies as well. Burks has tons of upside, but he's very unpolished too. Garrett Wilson is very, very polished, but he's not the freak athlete that Treylon Burks is. Drake London is a monster of a man, but we haven't seen a lot of those big-bodied physical guys really work out as much as the league has gone more into worrying about separation and things like that. So even though these are good prospects and I like a lot of them, I still think the overall game of Devontae Smith is a little bit better than a lot of these players.
I know I will be fishing for Devontae Smith all over my dynasty league. Once we get, sooner we get closer and closer we get to the draft. So I'd love to take there for sure. All right, boys. On to the last topic of the night. Miles Sanders. Wow, Miles Sanders, once being called the next Saquon Barkley during his rookie season, and he's had a pretty up and down career. Didn't score a touchdown this season. It's pretty impressive for a running back not to score a touchdown. But Jibs, the Miles Sanders, buddy. I mean, is there a redemption for him, or we've seen what we've seen at him at this point?
Stick a fork in him. He's done. He's done. The guy's a glass cannon. He's played 12 games over the last 2 seasons. The NFL has extended 1 game, so there's basically more probability that he's going to miss time. But he's going to be I think he's like a good RB3 to be like reliable for like consistent consistent throughout the year, but I just can't rely for him to be putting up good numbers for my team, and I don't want him to be my RB2 on my Dynasty team. So even though he's young, I would rather get off him.
All right, I respect it. I respect it for sure. Garrett, over to you, my friend. How do you feel about Miles Sanders right now?
Whelmed? Am I allowed to say whelmed?
Whelmed.
It's so tough. Miles Sanders, I don't think that he's not talented. Like, I do think that he has talent. He has ability. The hard part is I don't fully know what they want to do as far as, is he going to be able to be a 3-down back? It doesn't really look like it. They were kind of finicky with their running back usage. It was, 1 week, one guy's the hot hand and we're going to ride him. And then the next week, this guy's in the doghouse because he ticked me off and kicked my dog or something. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles' usage of their running backs, but it's just really, really difficult to project. And so if you want to buy on his ability, I'm not mad at you. But if you want to be completely out because I don't know what the heck's going on and I just don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, I'm also cool with that. So, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Is that a good
That's right.
That's a perfect example of Miles Sanders. John, let's wrap this up with you, my friend. Is Miles Sanders right now, is he worth an early second-round pick for you?
Early second. Holy smokes.
I mean, I guess if you're an
probably not mid or early second. Probably not. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably not buying in on Miles Sanders. If you have him, that's what you're going to ask for. You're going to ask for a mid or early second. I get it, but that's not what I'm giving up. I don't think there's real upside there. I don't think there's, like Jib said, he's a running back 3, but he's never going to break into that huge next. We've seen the best out of Miles Sanders. He's not going to break into that next tier all of a sudden. We talked about Antonio Gibson. We talked about some of these, other running backs that kind of meander in that middle ground, but could break out. I think Miles Sanders meanders in that middle ground and could bust down and get worse next year. And all of a sudden, Kenneth Gainwell's he's splitting time with Kenneth Gainwell, and we're looking at it going, Miles Sanders just a committee guy, and you don't want a piece of that because, again, the other part of this committee is Jalen Hurts as their running back, as a running back. So it's even more when you get into the red zone. There's a reason why he doesn't have a lot of touchdowns. So I'm out on Miles Sanders almost completely.
All right. I mean, I respect it. I respect it for sure. He's not on my NFL team, so I don't care.
Super talented. And we've talked about it. Super talented guy, but there's just different for fantasy. He's just not I don't know if he's ever going to be a difference maker on my fantasy roster.
No, right. I think that's the best way to describe him. I mean, you see he's losing targets every year. He doesn't score this past season with Jalen Hurts rushing for 10 touchdowns. There's no upside, but it says if he's going to be able to get 250 carries, but he might not last the whole season 250 carries. So it's like Chip said, it RB3 at best, and maybe there's something there, but. And like Garrett said, the situation is just all over the place. So we'll see how it goes for him this offseason. But that is going to wrap us up for tonight, guys. This was a fantastic episode. You guys all gave some amazing ass takes. And appreciate you guys all jumping on. Garrett, we appreciate you jumping on, my friend, as always.
Absolutely.
So before we do let everyone go here, Garrett, if there's anything you want to mention, the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, if you're like me, this is film grinding season. So this is the opportunity to get in and watch some tape on players. And at Dynasty Nerds, we've built a massive film library, and specifically we really focused on all 22 film. Most of the guys are going to be drafted in your first and second rounds of your Superflex Dynasty League. We have 2, 3, 4, 5 games of all 22 on a lot of those players. So it's a great resource to be able to go in, watch these players, get the different angles, especially for me, like on running backs. It's so hard to really determine a running back's vision on the broadcast view. You really just can't see where the holes are developing. Sometimes it's even hard to tell, like, was that a zone run? Like it's tough to tell sometimes from the angle you get from behind. You're like, oh no, that was a gap, or oh no, that was a duo, or that was, whatever. Like it's much easier to see all of that. see if they hit the holes, that kind of thing. So that is an invaluable resource that we have over at dynastynerds.com.
He is not lying, guys. I've been using it the last 3 years myself, and it is a fantastic tool. So definitely
big compliment to you and your whole team. I've been using it like crazy. So
appreciate it.
Great
Appreciate
tool for sure. John, my friend, how'd you enjoy your first podcast, man?
I loved it. Felt good. Felt natural, you know. I felt like I was just dive right in head first. So yeah, I'm excited. You can catch me at Fantasy Coaches now. There is no at anything else now. Now you can just catch me here. There's nothing else. I don't need to plug any other shit.
I love it. Coach Shivs, anything you want to mention before we get out of here?
It's bedtime, baby.
It is bedtime right now. All old now, but we appreciate you all for tuning in. If you're listening it live or if you're listening to it later, as always, can check out our website at www.thefantasycoaches.com. Like I said, brand new guys, cool new things on there. So check us out. And if you ever want to follow us on Twitter, you can do that at Coaches Fantasy. Until next time, guys, we'll be back next Monday for another new episode. Till then, guys, have a great one.